It was the summer of 2018. A teenage girl was excited to spend some time outdoors with her uncle. For Jeremiah, taking his niece camping was something they did often. It was a chance for them to bond, enjoy nature, and catch up. But this time was different. While most of their weekends were spent at the Crystal Mountain, they decided to do something a bit more challenging. This time they were going to hike up to a remote lake in the Cascade Mountains in Washington. If the family had a motto, it was always go big or go home. And the trek to the remote lake was exactly that. Their destination was Hidden Lake, a beautiful spot tucked away in the Alpine Lakes Wilderness area. It was a popular destination, but getting there was not easy. The 9-mile round trip was considered difficult due to the terrain. It required a climb of around 2,300 feet. There were steep, rocky paths, and the elevation gain made it hard to breathe. Most people would take 2 days to complete the hike, making camp halfway up before continuing the next day. But Jeremiah and his niece were not like most people. They were experienced hikers and adventurers, so they planned to do it all in one day. On Friday, July 12, 2018, Jeremiah dropped his niece Ella off at his parents' house. He picked her up around 6:15 p.m. and they hit the road. Before long, they arrived at the trailhead and got ready to start the hike. They had everything they needed: plenty of food and water, a tent, sleeping bags, emergency supplies. They also had each other. No one else was joining them on this adventure. It's just the uncle and niece. And then they began the ascent. At the beginning of the trail, there is a sign warning visitors about bears. It reads, "A 350-pound black bear can cover 5 miles per hour on foot. Be alert and make noise to avoid an encounter." That warning would be the last thing anyone read that would relate to the mystery of what happened to Jeremiah and Ella. After about 5 hours of hiking, it was around midnight by the time they reached their destination, Hidden Lake. The hike had taken longer than expected, so they didn't stick around long. They pitched their tent, made a fire, ate some food, and went straight to sleep. They would only be at the lake for a few hours before they continued on to their final destination, a spot called the Burrows, a collection of jagged peaks jutting out from the mountains. When the sun came up, Jerry and Ella woke up and enjoyed the view. They shared a kiss good morning, and Jerry took his niece on the rest of the journey. But the weather had changed since the night before, and they encountered heavy fog. All around them, visibility was almost zero. It was here, in this moment, that their fates would change forever. As they hiked, they realized there was no way they could continue on to the Burrows. The conditions were too dangerous. Visibility was poor. The path was unclear, and they would run out of water soon. So they decided to turn back and head to the car. And now the terrifying part of the story begins. According to reports, there are strange occurrences that have been reported in the area surrounding Hidden Lake. Hikers who have walked the trail in the past said they felt watched. Some claim they saw strange figures in the forest. Others said they heard disembodied whispers. One hiker claimed they saw the shadow of a large man-like creature slink behind a tree. But those stories are just legends. Or are they? Perhaps when Jerry and Ella turned back at Hidden Lake, whatever lurked in the forest chose to reveal itself. We don't know what happened next, because there was no record of it until one recent day when searchers stumbled upon a video that changed everything. What happened next is pure speculation based on the scant details released by officials. But we do know they were reported missing when they didn't show up for Ella's karate class on Sunday. When Jerry's truck was found at the trailhead, a search team was dispatched, but they found no trace of the missing pair. Over the next several weeks, hundreds of volunteers joined the effort to find Jerry and Ella, but there was no sign of them anywhere. The case went cold. 5 years passed without answers until May 2023, when a base jumper was practicing near a dried-up riverbed, his helmet camera rolling. Suddenly, he lost his footing and tumbled over a cliff. Miraculously, he survived the fall, but his camera was lost until recently, when a group of explorers looking for sunken treasure came across it. They recognized it as the missing base jumper's camera. So they dove into the murky depths of the ravine to retrieve it. When they looked at the footage on the memory card, they saw something shocking. On May 11, 2018, 2 days after Jerry and Ella went missing, someone had come across the camera. It was resting on a rock in the exact location where the base jumper had fallen. It seems the camera was knocked off its perch and into the ravine by a falling rock. Whoever had been carrying it slipped and fell too, but was not seen. And now the biggest question of all is answered. Yes, whoever had the camera was not from this world. This isn't a conclusion, but a fact. In the background of the video, you can see tall, thin figures walking through the trees. There is no mistaking them for humans. These beings are too tall, too thin, and they walk in ways that no human ever could. They appear to be observing the camera, which has been left behind. One of them reaches out a long, spindly finger and touches the lens. Then they walk away again, disappearing into the tall trees. This is not a conclusion, but a fact. The camera wasn't knocked into the river by a rock. Someone, or something, pushed it. Now, many believe these beings were responsible for the disappearance of Jerry and Ella. But why? And what happened to their bodies? Why would they take the camera? Was it some sort of trophy? But if you ask me, this footage raises more questions than it does answers. First of all, if these creatures are real, why haven't we seen them before? They seem to be everywhere in this video. How is it that we've only caught glimpses of them and never actually seen one in its entirety? If they're so common, how is that possible? Then there's the fact that the camera was found 5 years later. It would make sense that if these creatures were real, that they would want to hide their existence. If they'd been seen by humans before, we may have already begun searching for them. But the fact that it took 5 years for the camera to be discovered suggests that this area may be a portal of some kind. Perhaps these beings are from another dimension, and they walk among us whenever the portal is active. It's possible that the fact that the base jumper was doing a recreational activity on cliffs near a dried-up riverbed may have triggered the portal. After all, portals tend to appear in places where there is a high concentration of natural energy. And while there may be no scientific basis for any of what I'm suggesting, it does explain why the camera was left behind. The truth is, we'll probably never know exactly what happened to Jerry and Ella. These beings may be hiding their existence not just from us, but from each other. Jerry and Ella may have stumbled upon a secret they weren't meant to see, a secret that these beings were trying to keep hidden. Whatever the case, we can be sure that they will never walk among the living again. Thanks for watching. If you liked the video, please subscribe. Till next time, remember to stay curious. They vanished without a trace. There's no sign of a struggle, and no obvious reason for why they would have run away together. It seemed impossible that two experienced outdoorsmen like David and his niece would just disappear into the vast wilderness without a peep out, and yet there was no sign of them anywhere. Their tent was still standing. Their car was parked at the trailhead, and their phones were left behind, fully charged. Then in April 2023, almost exactly 5 years to the day since they disappeared, a development in an unrelated case brought new life to this mystery. A base jumper who wished to remain anonymous was launching himself off a cliff in Washington State when his helmet camera became dislodged during the jump. He watched in horror as it tumbled over the edge and out of sight. When he went to retrieve it, he discovered something that nobody could have anticipated. On the recording, you can see the base jumper walking along a narrow ledge high up on a cliff face. Just beyond him is the yawning chasm of a deep ravine. As he continues on, the ledge narrows further until it's barely wide enough for him to stand on. Then suddenly, his helmet cam drops. It falls over the edge of the ledge and onto the forest floor far below. As soon as the base jumper realized what had happened, he called the authorities. They sent in a team to recover the camera, but because of the location and the danger involved, it wasn't an easy task. Finally, it was retrieved and handed over to the sheriff's department. That's when they noticed there was a memory card inside the camera. On it was one very disturbing video file. The video showed the base jumper exploring the same ravine where his camera had fallen, but he wasn't alone. Accompanying him was none other than David, the missing camper from 2018. In the video, David was pointing out different features of the area, including the precarious ledge which he claimed was only accessible by climbing down a vertical rock face. "If you want to get down here," he said, "you have to climb down this wall." The base jumper didn't go into the ravine, so we don't know how far it went. But it was clearly deep and disused, having not been explored in many years. At that point, the authorities hadn't yet released any information about the investigation. So the base jumper didn't realize whose voice belonged to the man in the video. He went back to view the footage on the memory card and was shocked to see that it also contained video clips of a young girl believed to be David's niece, as well as some very recent photographs. When the sheriff's office learned about the video, they were able to confirm it was indeed David and his niece. But they also noticed something else, something that pointed to foul play. The most recent photos were dated March 26, 2023, just 3 days before the video was filmed. This meant the two had been missing for almost 5 years longer than anyone had realized. What's more, these were the first concrete signs of life anyone had seen from either of them since they disappeared. So how were they still alive, or had they been dead all along? The discovery of the video renewed interest in the baffling disappearance, especially as nobody had ever been able to venture into the remote ravine to see if the two were hiding there. David was an experienced outdoorsman, and he knew the area well. It seemed unlikely that he would simply get lost. His family told the press that he would have never run away or abandoned his niece, and they knew he wouldn't let anything happen to her. At the time, there was no evidence that they'd encountered foul play. But with the video now showing up in a remote and hard-to-access area, things began to change. The Washington State Search and Rescue says that people going missing in the wilderness generally fall into one of 4 categories: lost, injured, dead and alive, but not in any physical danger. In other words, people who choose to stay in the wilderness voluntarily for reasons such as religious, political, or psychological. Despite extensive searches, none of those options really applied to David and his niece. There were no signs of a struggle or foul play, nor did they appear to be in any distress. All of their supplies were still in the tent, and there were no indications that they'd become injured and needed help. They weren't the type to disappear of their own volition. So searchers suspected that they were in danger somewhere and desperately needed rescuing. This was backed up by the fact that there were no signs of decomposition or body odor around their campsite, meaning that they couldn't have been there for several years. Instead, the most likely scenario was that they got spooked by something and ran off into the forest. If this was the case, they probably didn't make it far. People don't normally survive long in the wilderness without food, water, or shelter. So why did they disappear? One of the possible explanations considered by investigators was that David and his niece were abducted by a passing motorist. Although there were no tire tracks at the site, they could have been caused by someone driving an ATV or other off-road vehicle. Another possibility was that they ran into a group of campers who invited them to join them for a night or maybe a weekend of partying. This may have started off innocently enough, but then things took a dark turn when their new acquaintances decided that they didn't want the extra company anymore. But according to the family, these theories didn't sit right with them. Sarah, David's sister, insisted that her brother would have never let anything happen to her daughter, and that he certainly wouldn't have allowed her to be taken against her will. However, she admitted that David was prone to taking risks, so it was just as likely that he had wandered into a dangerous situation and then panicked, leaving his niece behind. David loved camping and fishing, but he was also known for taking big risks. 5 years earlier, he'd gone base jumping in Utah and had been recorded free-falling 17,000 feet without a parachute, something like that. It wasn't out of character for him to find himself in a risky or precarious situation. But what about his niece?